I wonder what family traditions you have at Christmas. How do you put your decorations up, for example? Do you set aside a time for everyone to be together to put the decorations around the house? Do you play Christmas music at a loud volume while you do so? That's what happens in our house. Do you have a Christmas tree that has been in use for many, many years? Or decorations which have been handed down in your family? And how do you do Christmas Day? Do you open all the presents first thing? Or do you hold back till later? Do all the presents come from Santa? Or are most presents labelled with the people who gave them? Every family I know has different ways of doing things. The Christmas Day I grew up with was this: stockings first thing in the morning, then breakfast, then church, then a couple of presents if there's time before lunch, then a long Christmas dinner, followed by the Queen at 3, then the rest of the presents, then a game, and then more food later in the evening. I wonder if that's anything like your Christmas Day. I remember one of my friends telling me about the shock he received when he was first married and spent his first Christmas with his wife and her family. Christmas Day began with opening stockings, as is common for many of us. But in my friend's in-laws' family, stockings were opened first thing in the morning, but they were taken into the in-laws' bedroom to do so, and everyone sat on the in-laws' bed with the in-laws still in it and opened their stockings together. To them as a family, this was entirely normal. To my friend, newly joined to this family, still getting to know these people, it was horrifying. They never did it again. I wonder what Christmas traditions you have. The traditions we have, of course, change over time. Not that long ago, very few people put lights outside their houses at Christmas. Now, if you drive around Chalk Farm or any other housing estate, you will see them everywhere. I remember one house that we lived in where our opposite neighbour went big on the Christmas lights outdoors. The problem we had was he never turned them off. So as we were trying to get to sleep at night, our bedroom was like a disco with flashing lights the whole time. It seems to me each year that Christmas lights get more and more elaborate. If you go and look in the shelves at B&Q at the moment, you will find coloured lights, white lights, ice white and warm white, long lights and short lights, indoors and outdoors, lights in dogs, all with 8 different options for flashing, glowing and pulsating. And then there is our traditional telling of the Christmas story, the Nativity. Mary and Joseph travelling on a donkey to Bethlehem, finding no room at the inn, and ending up alone in a stable where Mary gives birth surrounded by the animals, and later where shepherds and wise men, complete strangers, turn up with Jesus lying in a manger, an animal feeding trough. We've sung about it this evening in some of our carols. This is probably the nativity story that you grew up with. It's certainly the one I grew up with. And it's comforting, I think, to hear it again year after year, reassuring us that even if the world changes, and as we change, and as this year we cope with yet another Christmas influenced by COVID, that some things stay the same. But I have a problem, and my problem is this. As a Christian and as a vicar, I'm committed to reading the Bible and to trying to understand not what I've been told it says, not what our Christmas traditions tell us it says, but reading what it actually says, what it actually tells us about the birth of this baby, Jesus. And I think when we read the Bible and really try to listen to it without the baggage of the traditional nativity, we find something quite different. Our reading from Luke did indeed say, "And Mary gave birth to her firstborn son, and wrapped him in bands of cloth, and laid him in a manger, because there was no place for them in the inn." But inn, I have to tell you, isn't a great translation of the Greek word here. The word is kataluma, and it means the spare or upper room in a private house, where travellers received hospitality and where no payment was expected. So Joseph and Mary didn't first go to an inn. They were coming to their own family. And Eastern hospitality wouldn't have dreamed of doing anything but welcoming the travellers into the home, to a small guest room built on the roof to take in visitors and family, the kataluma. Perhaps this kataluma, this guest room, was already occupied. Or perhaps Luke is just telling us that the spare room was not big enough for a birthing mother and all those who assisted her in her birth. And even though it's firmly lodged in our traditions, Luke does not point us to a drafty stable with an open door, as the carol says. In fact, if you notice, no stable is ever mentioned at all. Because 2,000 years ago, people kept their animals in their homes, not an outbuilding, not least because they couldn't afford an outbuilding. Here's a picture of a home at the time of Jesus. The animals are downstairs, the people live upstairs. But there was no space upstairs to put Jesus, and no space in the spare room on the roof either, the kataluma. And so they improvised, and they put Jesus downstairs in the manger. On realizing the difference between our traditional nativity stories and what the Bible actually tells us, someone said this: When I discovered this a year ago, it opened up a whole new perspective on what it means that Jesus came as one of us, not hidden away in either that lowly stable or in the carefully prepared guest room. Jesus came into the world in the midst of the main living space, with all its chaos and noise. Because of that, it's easier to imagine Jesus joining me in the chaos and noise of my everyday life, and not needing to take myself off to some totally luxury-denying place away from the world, or even a carefully prepared space like a church in order to meet him. Jesus is truly Emmanuel, God with us. For Luke, Jesus isn't pictured over there, away from everyday life, inviting us to visit once a year. But Jesus is pictured at the heart of a home, asking whether we too will make space for him. Now you might be feeling nervous about this Jesus driving a coach and horses through the traditional nativity story. But I have to tell you, it's not the last time that Jesus does that kind of thing. All grown up, Jesus went on to overturn the tables in the temple, to tell Bible teachers they didn't know their Bibles, and the religious purists that they were getting it all wrong. Like them, we don't let go of our traditions too easily. But as I think about it, I realize that this is just what we need. What we all need. The traditions and habits that we cling to so tightly don't serve us very well and don't give us what we hoped they would. As a society, we have more and better food than we've ever had, and yet we are getting less and less healthy. We have more wealth than ever before, and yet we can't overcome the division between rich and poor. We have better medication than ever, but we don't know how to face death. Albert Einstein once said, "The definition of foolishness is doing the same thing and expecting a different result." If we just keep on doing the same old things in our nation, in our communities, in our own lives, life isn't going to get any better. Something needs to change. The same is true for us as individuals, me and you. Many of us continue to live with pain from the past, and our habits haven't brought us any healing. We live with conflict with others or within ourselves, and we have found peace elusive. We wonder where our lives are going, and we haven't found a real sense of purpose. We live with wounds and hurts inflicted on us, or that we have inflicted on others, and we long for forgiveness. 2,000 years ago, Jesus burst onto the scene and came right into the center of the lives of those he met. We need him to do the same for us today. Earlier on, we sang "O Little Town of Bethlehem," which contains these words, "O Holy Child of Bethlehem, descend to us, we pray. Cast out our sin and enter in. Be born in us today." The real wonder of Christmas isn't our traditions or our glistening lights. It isn't just the fact that Jesus, Son of God, took human form and was born in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago. No, the real wonder of Christmas is that he can be born in us today, in me and in you. That he can bring his healing, his peace, his purpose, his forgiveness into our lives. If, just as they did in Bethlehem that first Christmas, if we make space to welcome him into our lives this year. Will you do so? Will you welcome Jesus into the midst of all that's going on for you at the moment, this Christmas?